And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. and allied airstrikes on Libya have entered their fifth day as part of an international effort to enforce a no-fly zone approved by the UN Security Council. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's air force and his long-range air defense systems have largely been destroyed, according to the U.S. commander of the Allied task force charged with enforcing the UN resolution. U.S. Navy Admiral Samuel J. Locklear III said yesterday U.S. and allied forces have launched 162 Tomahawk missiles and conducted more than 100 attacks with precision-guided satellite bombs since the operation began. But he conceded airstrikes had failed to stop Libyan government forces from launching attacks against civilians. Meanwhile, President Obama has been negotiating with coalition partners how to step down from the U.S. leadership position in the coming days.
We will continue to support the efforts to protect the Libyan people, but we will not be in the lead. That's what the transition that I discussed has always been designed to do. We have unique capabilities. We came in up front fairly heavily, fairly substantially, and at considerable risk to our military personnel. And when this transition takes place, it is not going to be our planes that are maintaining the no-fly zone.
Late yesterday, Gaddafi made his first televised appearance since the bombing campaign began. Speaking from the Bab al-Zizia compound targeted Sunday, he urged all Islamic armies to join him. Delivering a defiant address, he vowed to continue fighting and told his supporters they would emerge victorious in the war against rebels and international forces. But in an interview with Diane Sawyer on ABC News yesterday, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton suggested Gaddafi loyalists are seeking ways out for the embattled leader. She said, "We've heard about other people close to him reaching out to people that they know around the world, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, North Africa, beyond, saying, what do we do? How do we get out of this? What happens next?" Clinton said she's unaware if Gaddafi himself had reached out.
I'm not aware that he personally has reached out, but I do know that people allegedly on his behalf have been reaching out. So that's why I say this is a very dynamic situation.
But are you indicating that there's someone close to him on his behalf reaching out to say, how do we get out? How does he get out?
This is what we hear from so many sources, Diane. It is a constant. Today, yesterday, the day before. Some of it, I'll be very, as my personal opinion, some of it is theater. A lot of it is just the way he behaves. It's somewhat unpredictable. But some of it, we think, is exploring. What are my options? Where could I go? What could I do? And we would encourage that.
To discuss the situation, we're joined by Asli Bali. Professor Bali teaches international law at the UCLA School of Law. She's written and commented extensively on the question of international intervention in Libya. And we're joined by Khaled Mattawa in Ann Arbor. He's an acclaimed Libyan poet and scholar and associate professor at the University of Michigan. Professor Mattawa, let's begin with you. Can you talk about your reasons why you feel intervention is important?
Well, the first immediate reaction, or that the intervention had taken, was to save the city of Benghazi. On the one day after the UN resolution had passed, Saturday, Gaddafi went into Benghazi and killed approximately 95 people, and injured maybe twice or three times as that many people. Clearly, he is going to subdue these towns with bullets and fire. He's doing the same thing in Misrata. He's doing the same.
We've just lost Khaled Mattawa at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. We're going to try to get that satellite back. But let us turn to Professor Asli Bali. You are against intervention. Tell us why.
I would not say that I'm against intervention. I'm against, or I am critical of the current intervention. So I'm not categorically against intervention. And equally, I think that there were alternative forms of intervention that might have been pursued that were not explored initially. So I think the binary choice that we face, which is do nothing or engage in this kind of an extensive use of force with a relatively open-ended authorization through the Security Council, is a false framing. I think that there were alternatives available both prior to the decision to engage in the ICC referral in the first Security Council resolution and prior to the decision to authorize use of force in the second Security Council resolution that might have been better alternatives, particularly if the goal is to end the killing of civilians, which I think should be the overwhelming goal of any attempted intervention of any form. So,
what are the alternatives?
For example, the International Crisis Group suggested just on the eve of the decision of the second Council resolution that there should have been a vigorous attempt to pursue a political solution, meaning demand an immediate ceasefire from the Gaddafi regime, but initiate negotiations, basically make it possible for peacekeepers to be put in on the ground, which would actually produce a buffer between regime forces and the civilian population, which is how you prevent civilians from being killed. It's very difficult, as we're seeing now, to militarily decisively either alter the balance on the ground or prevent civilians from being killed from the air. But if you had a buffer on the ground through, for example, a peacekeeping force of regional peacekeepers, that might have been an alternative. So one thing.
And how would those peacekeepers move in?
Well, the International Crisis Group's proposal was that you initiate, as I said, a vigorous political engagement, which demands an immediate ceasefire backed by a threat to pursue use of force authorization should that ceasefire not materialize, and then you negotiate the terms on which a peacekeeping force is allowed into the eastern provinces, probably through Egypt, with the cooperation. It would have required, for example, the support of the Arab League and the African Union, both of whom might have been willing to provide that support. There was indication at that point, so we're talking about 2-3 days before the Security Council decided to authorize use of force, there was indication that both the African Union and the Arab League were very concerned about the situation and desirous that something be done, something, again, that would focus on ending the killing of civilians. So you seek to negotiate a ceasefire, you seek to negotiate terms on which peacekeepers can come in order to produce a buffer, and then you create a political framework for negotiation between opposition forces and the regime in Libya in order to initiate a peaceful transition. So the idea being explore alternatives that make it possible to end the killing of civilians immediately and do no additional harm to civilians. I think that's really the key for any intervention. Does it meet the test of do no harm? But that's just one of many different proposals that were on the table. The key here is what were the alternatives between the two ends of the spectrum that we are constantly told is the only framing, namely do nothing or do what's in fact being pursued now. The idea that these alternatives were not seriously engaged or debated is, I think, really problematic.
We're talking to Asli Bali. She teaches international law at UCLA School of Law. We are going to break, then we'll come back to this debate about intervention.